Welcome to this episode of Unraveling Adoption. We're an intentional space to delve into adoption's complexities together. I'm Beth Syverson. I'm an adoptive mom of a vibrant and insightful 19-year-old son, Joey, who is struggling to find his path. I'm walking beside him while working on my own personal growth and healing. We are committed to helping anyone touched by adoption, and we want to help the general public understand adoption's complexities better too. Today's guest is Jenell Jones. She definitely understands adoption's complexities, let me tell you. She's a mom of 7 kids, 3 biological kids, 2 bonus kids, and 2 adopted kids. And her family's story around her youngest adopted daughter, Mercy, was recently published as a memoir entitled Shattered. Her daughter, Mercy, came to her at 8 years old after 21 foster placements and with undisclosed serious mental health issues. Her book aims to help foster and adoptive parents understand both the joys and challenges of parenting these traumatized children. She wants them to know it won't be what you expect, and you are not alone. So welcome to Unraveling Adoption, Jenell. I really appreciate your book, and I feel ya as another adoptive mom. I can relate to a lot of what you said in your book. So welcome. I'm glad you're here to share your story.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah. And there's some really heavy stuff that's happened to Mercy and therefore to your family. And I want everyone to go read your book. And there's a lot in the book. Mercy's story is pretty extraordinary and painful. But let's just walk through it so people can kind of get their bearings and figure out what's going on. Before you adopted Mercy, you already had 6 kids, 1 adopted kid and bonus kids and bio kids. And how were things before Mercy came into your family?
It was good. We have a large family, so I call it organized chaos.
Mm-hmm.
And we had our routines. I feel that our family was in a good place. My children were getting older. They were going to high school, so we were just the typical big family navigating through.
Mm-hmm. I think you started with fostering and then adopting Mercy. What prompted that? You just wanted to add to your family?
No, I actually didn't want to add to my family at all, to be honest with you. But there was a cute little girl at church one day and we had a connection. And then the pastor's wife said, "Hey, little Nikki needs a home." And I was like, "I like little Nikki." And I mentioned it to my husband and he's like, "What's one more?" So we brought her in.
Now, are you wanting to call her Mickey or Mercy?
Well, she was little Nikki when we got her and then we turned her to Mercy. Yeah.
That was her name before you got her. Oh, okay.
Yep.
And why did you change your name? I can't remember.
She asked me to. So She wanted us to change her name. So we did. Yeah.
Okay. So she just kind of caught your heart and you're like, well, we've already got this many. What's one more? We probably won't even notice at a certain
famous
point.
Last word, right?
Yeah. Did you notice?
Yeah, we noticed that one.
Yeah. Now, and she was 8 when you got her. And I'm sure you expected with an 8-year-old coming in, as opposed to like an infant, that there might be some bumps in the road. There's already been some history happening. But how did your reality and the expectations compare?
I'll say 2 things about that. One, when we got my other adoptive son, we got him when he was 3 days old and he was autistic. He was born addicted to meth and barbiturates.
Okay.
And also, he is 1 year older than Mercy. So for me, probably a naive state, I was like, well, they're 1 year apart. This is perfect. This works. Because he's 5 years younger than the last child I gave birth to. So he's like that odd child. Like nobody really wants to play with him. So it was like, oh, they'll have each other.
Yeah, they're the same close in age.
And then another thing that tugs on my heart about adoptive kids, and it always has, is I know that when they're older, they don't get adopted. And so that always has been something all my life that I've always thought about.
Yeah, that is very true. There's a lot of kids kind of stuck in foster care and everyone wants the little babies, the cute ones that they think they can have more control over, which is also sort of a fallacy. But yeah, so your heart went out to this 8-year-old and you're like, okay, we can make a big difference because you seem like a really cohesive family and you have all these older kids that can probably help. Oh man, I can totally see how this whole thing rolled out. And I don't want to dwell on it, but can you give us some highlights of what all happened with Mercy over it's been 8 years since you've had her, right?
Yeah.
Just kind of give us a rundown of some highlights of what all happened with Mercy.
So in the book, I describe her coming into the home and the fact that they knew the whole story.
The foster agency?
The foster agency, the state, they knew the whole story because she has 10 siblings. And most of them are still in the system. And there's court documents. So they had a complete history of her and her siblings and the issues they had encountered, and none of that was disclosed.
And did you know she had 21 placements?
No, I did not know that at the time. I did not know she had a twin brother when we brought her in.
And they separated her from her twin, which is unconscionable. Can't believe that happened.
Not only did they separate her, they separated her in a very inhumane manner. I describe it in the book. I mean, it's already trauma. One of the questions I ask myself is the things that they've done to her. It's one thing to have the trauma and abuse before she got in the system. But when these children make it to what's supposed to be safety, we cannot allow them to be traumatized and victimized even more.
Even more. Yeah. It seems like the system creates way more trauma to these already traumatized kids who should just be held so safely, but the systems are just failing ridiculously badly. Oh, and so she came into foster care with abusive parents, right? Obviously, that's probably why people get taken through foster care most of the times, right?
Abuse and neglect.
Okay, so an abuse and neglect, and then bounced around to different foster families. Why was she being bounced around so much?
Mercy has a very strong personality. She really does. She's one of those that you need to be on your game when you're messing with her. She is not for the weak. She is not for the newbie parent either.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they probably get these like volunteer foster families like, oh, I want to be helpful. And they have zero tools. You at least had a bunch of other kids. You'd been through the ringer probably with some of them, and maybe not to this extent, but you were an experienced parent. You also run a bunch of daycares and you have a degree in early childhood development or something. You seemed like you had checked all the boxes, being able to handle a complicated case. But it seems like even this was way more than that could even handle.
Yes, not only are you navigating through life, but when they don't disclose information to you, you're navigating through life, you're trying to add this child into your family, and now all of a sudden you've got to be Inspector Gadget.
Yeah.
And if you had the pieces and you told me, at least if I would have made the decision to take her in, I would have been able to implement a plan versus having to figure out what's going on and then try to implement a plan. That took years.
Oh, I'm sure.
Because it kept getting worse. And of course, I'm like, okay, it's because she hasn't attached. Okay, her behaviors are in school. It's because she doesn't know what the other kids know. So let me try to get her tutoring. We're wasting time when we had a foundation that was cracked and we really needed to go all the way back.
Yeah. Now, when you got her, what did they tell you she had as far as mental health or history?
They told me that she had been removed from her family because of neglect and possibly some physical abuse, which was a lie. And they told me that she's been kind of difficult to place. She's endured a little bit of abuse. They suspect sexual abuse, but they've never been able to confirm it. And that we are the family they prayed for.
Who prayed for?
Her team, because they knew that they had failed her.
Okay, so the foster care team, the agency or whatever in your state. Okay, so they were praying. I bet they were praying for somebody to come get her. So they kind of put that on you. Okay. And the truth was she was extremely abused sexually in many other ways, right? But they knew, but did not tell you.
And they knew the true family history. And they knew that her mom had mental health needs as well.
Which are often genetic.
So they knew everything and they left it out.
And it's pretty clear to me they left it out just so they could get her placed.
Right.
You even say in the book, if you had known, you would have thought several times about adopting her if you had known all of this, because holy cow, it's a giant pile of stuff this poor girl has through no fault of her own.
Right.
It's not her fault, but it's all these adults that are failing her all over the place. But adoptive parents, I think, should have the ability to assess a situation and go, can I handle this? Can I literally handle this? And you probably would have said no. I would have said no. I mean, I don't know who could handle everything that Mercy's got on her plate.
So to go back to what you were saying, I think even on would I have adopted her? I don't know. You're right. I don't know if I would have, but I can't say I would have walked away from her either. Maybe I would have fostered her.
Fostered, sure.
Maybe I would have just been a strong advocate for her. I had created a bond with her, so I can't imagine I would have walked away. But even if I would have chose to adopt her, I would have had the pieces that I could have implemented something different earlier. We wouldn't have been wasting time on minimal therapy. We would have been going right to the big stuff.
Yeah.
And then when these are children you're talking about, so we also have brain development going on. If we can do intervention earlier, we can have a more sustainable impact, right?
Yeah.
And
but
so,
you didn't have the tools, so.
Exactly. And also another thing I have to say about this non-disclosure, when you have the possibility of taking a child that's been exposed to sexual abuse, you're bringing them in with your own typical children. We need to protect all the kids involved. So we shouldn't be put, so we shouldn't be put in a situation where we could be creating more victims.
Yes, that's absolutely true. It's not fair to your family and to your kids. It's not Mercy's fault either, but you needed to know to take steps to keep everybody else safe, because it kind of shocked you when an incident happened. You're like, what? And then it became, oh, of course she's acting out in that way because of the way she was abused. And that would have been good to know.
It all makes sense. And it's definitely not Mercy's fault. But here's the thing, we have to protect all children, and that's why I told the story. It's not necessarily to put my family's business out. It's because we have to do something that creates a change to protect all children, all families. So we can do our jobs of fostering and adopting in a safe manner and have the resources we need.
And your next oldest child is autistic and particularly vulnerable and might not be completely aware of all the subtleties going on.
Yeah, correct.
I do want people to understand the depth of the issues that Mercy has. And by the way, Mercy is a pseudonym, not her real name. But I know she ended up getting diagnosed with DID, dissociative identity disorder, which we have done a whole episode on. I will link it in the notes. It's a very serious mental illness that used to be called multiple personality disorder. And her voices were telling her to do stuff that is very terrifying, like killing you and putting knives to people's throats and things like that. So that's a very big one. Were there other diagnoses that shocked you?
So she's got every diagnosis all the way up to bipolar, schizophrenia, RAD, of course.
Reactive attachment disorder.
ADHD. But I will say, this is probably the most shocking thing to me. Her diagnoses are based on the examination of the year and who paid for it. So when I have an evaluation done, last year's 2021's diagnosis was done and paid for by the state. It left out a whole bunch of diagnoses. My 22 diagnosis, it was done in December of 22, so it's this year's, was done by a private psychologist that was hired by us. It lists everything. So the diagnosis changed based on who's paying for them.
Yeah, so a long time ago, when I was super naive, I thought a diagnosis was a diagnosis. It's just a fact, like data. But it's not. It serves people's interests, right?
It does.
Is that what you found?
Yeah. When she came back home, I wanted to put her in this early onset schizophrenia program. But the diagnosis that the state did, it didn't have enough information listed, so she didn't qualify.
And because they didn't list it, they won't have to pay for a schizophrenia program. Is that kind of what you're getting to? Yeah.
Even though the diagnosis the year before had all those things on there.
God, that's so frustrating.
Yeah.
Part of the thing that I felt so strongly about your story, and I connected with you deeply, is that I have felt in my journey with my son, who has significant mental health issues, not quite as severe as your daughter's, but pretty significant ones that I've had to send him away for. And it's been really rough, and it's not a competition or anything. But one thing I've noticed that I really resonated with you is that no one knows what the fuck they're doing.
Correct.
No one knows. And I feel like I had to explain to psychiatrists and psychologists, look, this kid is adopted. He has attachment issues. And they would argue back to me, oh, well, he was baby. He didn't know it. So that can't be anything. And I'm like, oh my gosh, do you not understand trauma and attachment? And how do I know more? I'm a musician. What am I supposed to know about this stuff? You guys go to school for 8-10 years. You guys should know. And we're trusting our kids with these people that are completely incompetent. Does that ring true to you?
Yes.
I just kept nodding when I was reading it, but like, oh, yes.
Yeah, I very much describe that in the book, but I think what's going on is we don't have enough real conversations. We don't have enough current documented studies based on what we're going through. Even when it comes to these children, who's their voice?
Yes.
Everything is confidential. If a child gets hurt in the system, it's limited information, right? Because who's going to talk about it? They don't have any advocates. But the problem is, if we keep it in the dark, if the truth never comes out, then how do we have a change?
That seems like a huge problem for you, because you were dealing with just lack of information. People were not upfront with you.
Yeah.
If they were upfront and you had accepted her into your family, you would have had way more understanding of what's going on. You would have gone, like you said, deep dive right away. You wouldn't have piddled around with little this and little that. But it's just a lack of honesty in the whole system.
And maybe if I was the only person that I've ever heard of, but the more I talk to people, the more I'm hearing similar stories on different levels. And so I'm like, why are we not talking about this? I was at a book signing in LA, and they were actually giving away some of my books free. And this guy, he asked me, what is your book about? So I told him it was at a book festival. And he said, yeah, I'm a former foster parent. I was like, oh, would you like a copy of the book? And he's like, absolutely not. And he looked at me. He gave me that look like, I don't want to relive the trauma that I've already been through. This is such a widespread problem. We need to talk about this because we have to make a change, because the problem is getting worse. You know, if you look at the amount of children, what are foster to prison numbers, our foster care to homeless numbers.
Oh, yeah.
These children are having more children and they're ending up in the system, and the problem's repeating itself. We can't sweep it under the rug. It is huge. And a lot of people are like, oh, it doesn't affect me. And I'm like, yes, it does, because we're coming across these children and then we don't have solutions to deal with the trauma. And some of them are violent. So we don't want a family member or somebody else we love to get hurt.
Right.
And then we deal with the problem. It's a real problem.
It's a very serious problem. Do you know the statistics of formerly fostered individuals that are incarcerated? It's a huge. I
don't know the number of incarceration. I know it's high.
It's like,
I know 70%. Homeless is between yeah. And I think they're saying homeless is like 28 to 40%, depending on what study you look at, that they're either former foster or adoptive children.
Yeah. It's a really terrible, terrible situation. And our culture tends to just want to put them away somewhere. So I guess jail and prison is where they end up being. And that eventually they were going to come back out, and the pain's going to come out one way or another. And they're going to be back into our culture, into our neighborhoods, into our families. And it just seems like, where are the people that are going to help us? I guess there's just no one.
And they're also housing our children in juvie. So they're teaching them. So when they can't get them in a residential treatment center or proper mental health, they'll hold them in juvie. And their logic is, at least they're getting their medication and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, no, we're teaching them how to exist in a small confined cell. Like they
Yeah,
need therapy and services, not
of
jail.
course. Yes. And they're not to criminalize children like that. It's just horrible. And oh man, there's just so many layers. I'm getting a little hopeless over here. And I don't want this episode to just be hopelessness. I, what keeps you going?
I think what keeps me going, and I think what everybody has to have in mind, we have to have these icky conversations. We have to talk about how bad it is. We have to understand the past and what's going on, and then we have to make solutions for the future. So we're talking about all these things, and we're talking about the uncomfortable and the yuck, but these kids are living it. And we have to have conversations like, whose bright idea is it to put these kids in juvie?
Yeah.
And so that's what keeps me going. I feel as bad as my situation is, it can help the next person. It can help the next child.
Yeah.
We have to talk about it. We need to talk about what trauma really does. We know in the early childhood field, we know what trauma does to children 0 to 3. So we're having those talks. Why are we having those talks? Because parents are like, we want parents to understand it. Well, we also need the people that are in charge of these children. We need our legislatures to know. We need our state representatives to know and understand this. We need our foster families to know and understand this. And then we need to provide change for everybody. Not only should the children be getting help, but as parents that are going through it with them, we need self-care and we need help too. We're in war zones. And even possibly their workers need help. Can you imagine going to pull these kids out of the situations they're in?
A couple of times there, you had where you were not safe to bring her home to you. And then some social worker is taking her in a car by herself. I'm like, holy cow, that does not sound safe. Why are they going by themselves?
Why are they going by themselves? And why don't they believe me?
Yeah.
So in the book, I describe her just getting out of the hospital and she's got the battle wounds even. And I'm telling her, do not do this. And they're doing it anyway. And the hospital's like, yeah, take her home. But common sense should have prevailed in the story. Like, this isn't safe.
She's just a hot potato and people are just tossing her from one thing to the next. Oh, I can't handle her. You can't handle her. Somebody's got to handle her. There's got to be someone in our systems that can handle these difficult cases.
I have to say, even with Mercy, if I didn't have the bond that I had with her, like that day where the social worker took her off, I had to say, look, you will not attack this woman. Because she had said to me, I'm going to rip her to shreds. And I was like, you will not.
Oh my gosh.
And the lady actually looked at me and told me, thank you. And I had a vision in my head of her just jumping on her head while driving. I'm like,
terrifying.
You know, so, but if I can make the bond with the child that I had no relationship with, we should be able to make changes for these children. Because the people that are going to do that are people that actually really care about them and understand what they're going through. And we need those people to step up and we got to give them resources. And that's my hope, is that we'll find the people that really want to make a change, because we do it in our society. We have early Head Start. And I mentioned early Head Start because really the goal of that program was to change the trajectory of children that are born into poverty, and it works. And so if we can start something where we're going to change the trajectory of these children, we have the resources to do it in this country, and we have to.
Yeah, we have to prioritize it. And it's for sure for the kids. Obviously, none of this is Mercy's fault. She's extremely got dealt a raw hand, bad cards from the beginning that just continued until she found you. I think that she's super lucky to have found you. And by the way, throughout the book, you demonstrate that you just had a fearless demeanor with her, which she needed. She needed someone to say, I am not afraid of you, which I'm sure you were pretty afraid of her, I'm going to guess, but you just had to look like you were not afraid of her, and how tough that must have been for you.
When we got her, she was 8 and she was tiny and she was little.
Yeah.
Now at 16, she's 2 of me. So
Yep.
I'm glad I instilled that early.
Yeah, honestly, she could just wallop you. Yeah, they're looking for somebody to have some strength and to say, I got you. But man, that took so much courage from you. And I know you did get hurt by her a couple of times, or maybe many times, I'm not sure. But I'm sure it's terrifying looking her when she's in those rages and not in her own mind. But obviously, we need to do better for the children. But these adoptive and foster families need way more resources, particularly for the other children in your home. It's really criminal, the lack of resources to protect the other kids when one kid is violent or is chaotic and seriously mentally unstable. It just seems like there needs to be more help in these cases for the other kids and for the parents. The adoptive parents and the foster parents are totally traumatized. Did they offer you therapy? Did that ever come into play?
They barely offer her therapy.
I know. It's like you're at the bottom of the list, but obviously you've been incredibly traumatized by all of this because you deeply care about her. And even if you didn't, it would be deeply traumatizing having someone come at you with a knife or whatever. But man, there just needs to be more. And I agree with you that just talking about it, that's why I really wanted to bring you on. I'm not afraid to talk about this tough stuff. My whole podcast is all about tough stuff, addiction, mental health, adoption trauma, all this stuff. I think the more we can talk about it and bring it to the light, the more chance we have of getting the right people and the right systems to, I don't even know how they're going to come into play, but they're not going to come around if we just don't talk about it and we keep it all secret.
Yeah, because I think a lot of people have this fallacy that, oh, it's a great system and we protect and the kids get what they need. And it's not that.
Mm-mm.
And so we need to talk about that. I think if people really understood, it doesn't matter if you want to adopt or foster a child. You don't have to. Honestly, if that's not in your heart, don't do it because we don't need them damaged.
For sure.
But everybody needs to stand to make sure that every child is safe and they're going to be taken care of and they're going to be protected, especially when they're taken from their families, because then if the state agency takes that child, then that becomes that state's child. The village should be the state, right? And we all need to be looking out for the welfare of those children because we are coming in contact with them. And if we are going to provide for all the other countries we provide for and all the other immigrants we provide for, we should at a minimum be providing for our own children.
Yeah. Yes, I think so. If somebody's listening that is thinking about fostering or adopting an older age child, you know, I see these commercials on TV here and it shows these foster kids coming into a family, maybe 12 or 13, and it's happy, happy, joy, joy. Oh, isn't this great? And I was like, really? And obviously they need to be taken care of, but it's just not going to be a pretty picture in everyday life. It's going to be challenging. What would you like these hopeful adoptive or foster parents to know? What do you wish you had known?
I wish I would have known to get the true story, ask the hard questions. I think oftentimes we're trained not to press or ask questions people don't want to answer, right?
To be polite, yes.
To be polite. Don't be polite.
Yeah, dig
ask
in.
the hard questions and then build the team around you. Don't just go in by yourself. Go online and find that seasoned adoptive or foster care mother. Become their friend. Have them help you. Have them go to the interviews with you. Create that team. If that child has issues, look at it and look at your ability to be able to manage them. Don't count on state insurance. They all have state insurance, but you may need to go get a private doctor. Can you do that? Are you in the position? I pray you are. I want you to be. These are causes that I want people to pick up, but I want us to go in ready for it and knowing what's expected. I hope you fall in love with that child, right? And then you're willing to go as far as you can because that's what they need. And know that that child needs love. They need unconditional love. They don't need to be judged. And then for yourself, you need to love on yourself. You need to provide yourself self-care. You need to go and talk to a therapist too, because it's hard and it's traumatic, but it's so worth it if you can change that child for the better, if you can do something better in this society.
Yeah. I'm sure it's rewarding to you when she has a good day or reaches out and is loving back to you or is productive, or I'm sure you've made a tremendous impact on her life, even though she's still very troubled. But I'm sure without you, it would have been way worse. But I'm pretty sure you would agree with me that love isn't enough. We can't just love these kids out of the abuse and the neglect and the
you're not going to love
things.
them out of the, no, you're absolutely right. You're not going to love them out of the abuse, but love is definitely necessary. You need more than love, but you need love too. But I think what I'm saying there is that we have to have a motive. I think there probably still is the population that does this for money. There ain't that much money in the world. There ain't that much money in this. If that's what you're doing, you're a bad business person because you're going to be in the negative, right?
In a couple different ways, right?
Right. I'm one of those moms that will do any and everything I can to get what my child needs. And I think I describe that in my book.
You
right?
do. You go above and beyond. Absolutely.
And that's what it takes. Are we willing to do the hard stuff? Are we willing to say the hard things? But I want parents to go in it knowing that this is the fight from day one. I'm going to tell you that you got to come in fighting.
Yeah. It's not just, oh, let's help a child make a few extra bucks if you're fostering and it'll be just fine. It's serious business. We've got lives on the line here, your own family's lives and this child's life. It is no small task, and it's not for the faint of heart. You are just a warrior out there, just fighting for your daughter's dignity and her worth and her life, quite literally. I want to go back just quickly, just the logistics of the state insurance, because I think people think, oh, the state will take care of her. But I think you ran into the state not paying for anything that was actually working. They don't pay for anything that's actually helpful, like the deep therapy that's needed, the attachment therapy. They pay for the basics, kind of warehousing these kids, but it doesn't really get you the good stuff. Is that what your experience has been?
Yes. So my child is fortunate enough to have state level insurance and our private insurance, right? If Mercy did not have private insurance, she wouldn't have got any of the care she got.
Really?
In the book, I described going state to state, hospital to hospital. That wasn't even a possibility with her state insurance.
Oh, no kidding. So, where would she be if it was just her state insurance?
Probably still in a group home somewhere.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. The amount of times you were on the phone in the book, I don't know how many hours and hours and hours and hours you've spent on the phone, and people rejecting her, saying, no, we can't take her. We can't take her. We can't take her. How frustrating that must have been. And I just want to impress on people that are thinking about doing this, that this is not some little part-time job. It's a major undertaking that you are doing. And I don't know too many people who would do as much as you did. You just fought for her at every level, fought every system, every hospital, every social worker, and you just kept at it, and you're still keeping at it. You're still advocating for her. I just want people to understand what adoptive and foster parents have to do to advocate for these kids. It's no small thing at all.
No,
I think you did a great job.
It's not. Thank you. It's not a small thing, but at a certain point, I remember somebody telling me, why don't you just give her back? And I was like, but then who's going to fight for her?
Yeah.
That's what's wanted.
Yeah.
But then what's going to happen to her?
Yeah.
She will not make it if I let her go.
Right.
And so, like you said, I was fighting for her life, and I felt that way because she wouldn't have made it. And I remember we would go to a new hospital and I would be open and honest. I describe it in the book, open and honest. And they'd look at me and they're like, no, it couldn't be that bad. And
yeah,
I'm
they
like,
didn't believe you. I'm like, well, you should believe her.
Yeah.
You should really believe her. Yeah, people just are like, oh, no, it'll be fine. It'll be fine. They should really listen to the people who are in the trenches with these kids. I really think so. Oh, my gosh.
I think our book work has to be based on real life experiences. So by not telling our story, we're not giving our therapists and our professionals enough real data, which is
Okay.
another reason to talk.
Okay. So just to be open and honest with really what's going on. Like if someone's newly fostering or newly adopting, to that first red flag, you better be talking to someone right now about that first little thing, right?
Yeah, that
Don't let
gut,
it go.
that
Don't let it go.
yeah, that feeling you have in your gut,
Mm-hmm.
that intuition we
Mm-hmm.
sometimes get. There were
Listen to
several
that.
times with Mercy, I was like, am I talking to the same person? And then to find out later I wasn't.
Yeah, she has DID. So you're literally talking to fractioned parts of her that are literally
Right.
different people. Yeah. But that took a long time for people to diagnose her with that, right?
But I
DID.
saw it early on, but I didn't trust my own judgment.
Okay.
And now I'm like, oh, I was right.
So to talk to the professionals, hopefully they'll be helpful and understanding. But even if not, maybe just verbalizing it and just keeping things out in the open is a good idea.
And keep telling your story.
Yes.
Keep telling it until you find somebody that listens.
That's a very good point. Just keep being dogged about it and just keep going, fighting for these kids. Oh my gosh. Whew. Is there anything else you would like to share that we haven't talked about, or any topics that I missed?
I just want to say that I am just a normal person, right? And I made a difference for Mercy.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we need.
Mm-hmm.
We need normal people that are
Mm-hmm.
willing to make a difference.
Yeah.
It's hard, but these children really do need us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're just in the trenches with them, and we care. We parents really, really care about these kids. And if other people can come around and support us and keep stigma and shame away from our families, and just look at these kids as wounded, hurting souls that are acting out sometimes in really, really unfortunate ways, but they're just children. And if we can all just treat all of them, all of us, our families, with the dignity and worth that everybody is due, that would be a big step forward. Well, Jenell, thank you very much for sharing your story. It's pretty harrowing and it's ongoing. Do you want to share where Mercy is right now and what's going on with her now?
Sure. So Mercy is in a group home in Arizona with us. She's actually 10 minutes from the house. We do have a little bit of a debate. So my saga still continues about her care and coming home. So right now it's them against me, but that's okay.
Okay.
We just have to keep fighting. And I see such a difference in her. We still have a long way to go. She still needs a lot of therapy, but I told her yesterday, I'm so very proud of you because you fought and you've done so much and you still have a journey, but look at how far you've come.
Yes. Oh, I bet she really relishes that when people can be proud of her. And it might be small, tiny little steps, but considering what she has had to deal with her whole life, the small steps are huge. And we just have to just raise up all those little steps, and there might be some backward steps, but then more forward. And we just got to keep believing in our kids and remembering that it's not their fault what hand they were dealt.
Yes.
Well, I am keeping Mercy in my heart and you in my heart and all of your family members. And I just wish the best for you. Please keep in touch. And I think your story is very important for us all to hear, that families like yours exist. And what can we, as community members, as extended family members, as neighbors, as schoolmates, what can we do to help people like Mercy and your family? So thank you for bringing your story here. I totally appreciate your vulnerability, and your book was amazing. I hope everybody goes and reads your book, Shattered. And I will put the link to the book in the show notes.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you for being here. I want to let everybody know too that I have an adoptive parent group, and it's open to foster parents and kinship parents as well. It's called Aptitude. It's a support group for adoptive parents that are willing to face adoption's challenges. So in our group, we talk about the tough stuff. We don't just sugarcoat stuff and go, oh, isn't adoption great? We talk about, yeah, it's great. And it's very painful and our kids are struggling. So a lot of people in our group have really struggling kids, and There's pretty much nothing you can shock us with, and we're here for you. The group is free, and we have a book club, we have a Facebook group, we have a resource database, and we have a monthly speaker series. So I hope that some of you will join us. If you're an adoptive, foster, or kinship parent, the link is in the notes below. It's unravelingadoption.com/aptitude. And if any of you are interested in joining our Patreon community, you can support us with a small monthly donation as little as $5 a month. And it helps us offset the expenses of making this podcast and the time that I spend doing this work that I feel so deeply passionate about. So that link is also in the notes. It's patreon.com/unravelingadoption. Jenell, is there a way, if people wanted to get a hold of you, do you have a website or a email address? What would be the best way for them to get a hold of you?
So I do have a website. It's JenellJones.com, and I am reachable on there. And all the information on the book is on there, and where you can buy it as well. So, and all my events and podcasts and speaking events are listed too.
Nice. Okay. I'll make sure that's listed. Okay. Thank you all for listening. I really hope that you share this episode with somebody that maybe that's a foster parent or an adoptive parent that might need some encouragement or some you're not alone kind of vibe from us, or share this episode with a social worker or somebody that works in CPS or somebody that is a healthcare provider. Maybe this episode would be enlightening for them. So please share. We only can move forward if we continue to share openly and honestly about what's really going on with our families and with our kids. So thank you very much for spreading the word. And Jenell and I want you all to stay safe.